Imagine London in 1888, thick fog choking the breath, and a killer walking among the shadows unseen. As the fog grows, a new crime appears. Inspector Arthur has only one night to solve the puzzle before the killer disappears forever. Will he succeed in catching the shadow before it's too late? Listen now to the story of The Shadow of London Fog. The story began in the winter of 1888, when a thick and dreary fog covered the old streets of London, turning the city into a labyrinth of shadows and terrifying mystery. The gas lamps flickered faintly through the perpetual fog, like pale stars trying to penetrate the pitch darkness that dominated the general atmosphere. In a very narrow alley near the River Thames, an exhausted night watchman found a man's body lying on the cold, damp ground, without the killer leaving any clear trace indicating his true identity. The news spread like wildfire among the residents of the poor district, increasing the state of terror and panic that had been hovering over the city for several weeks. This was not the first body to be discovered under such mysterious circumstances, but it was the most ambiguous and complex until that moment in time. The fog acted as a protective curtain for the unknown killer, allowing him to move freely between poor and rich districts without being seen by any passers-by. People felt that there was a mastermind behind these serial events, someone who knew the city better than the police officers themselves. Rumors began to spread in crowded cafes and daily newspapers, putting immense pressure on the police directorate to find a quick solution before the public lost confidence completely in the authorities' ability to protect them from this hidden danger lurking in every dark corner of the British capital crowded with people. Inspector Arthur, a man with very long experience in the field of complex criminal investigations, was summoned to his office at Scotland Yard to face this new challenge that threatened the reputation of the entire police force. The office was filled with thick cigarette smoke that choked the breath, and Arthur's facial features reflected severe fatigue and exhaustion resulting from long nights spent without adequate sleep. Before him on the old wooden desk, secret official reports describing each crime in precise and tedious detail were accumulating, but he found no clear common thread linking the victims who belonged to completely different and distant social classes. Senior government officials pressured him to accelerate the pace of work and investigation, warning him of the very grave consequences if the killer continued to escape the city's legal grip. Arthur knew well that time was never on his side, and that every passing minute increased the difficulty of the task and complicated matters more and more dangerously. He decided to review all available evidence again, moving away from traditional search methods that had not yielded any tangible or useful results so far. Arthur deeply believed that the solution lay in the very small details that others might overlook, and he was ready to do his utmost to uncover the curtain on this complex puzzle. The city was waiting for him to be a true savior, and he was never ready to disappoint their hopes, despite the great weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders in those cold and dark nights that did not seem to have a near end. Inspector Arthur began drawing a very large map on the gray wall of his office, where he fixed small red pins in the places where the bodies were found during the past months with precision. He noticed a very strange pattern that began to form clearly before his tired eyes, where all the crimes were very closely linked to the days when London witnessed very thick and unusual fog. It was not just a passing coincidence or a random agreement, but there was precise prior planning that depended on the weather condition in a very amazing and suspicious way. Arthur began reviewing old meteorological records with extreme care and compared them to the times of discovering the bodies accurately, to confirm his hypothesis that began to crystallize in his mind very slowly and steadily. The killer was using the fog as a deadly weapon for him, meaning that he monitors the weather report regularly and plans his crimes based on it systematically. This discovery changed the course of the investigation completely, as the focus shifted from searching for a simple personal motive to searching for a person who has deep knowledge of weather patterns and the complex movement of the city. Arthur realized that the enemy he was facing was very smart and organized, and left nothing to chance in his complex and well-considered criminal plans. This new information gave him new and strong hope, as it narrowed the circle of suspects very significantly, and made him focus on people who might have a reason to use the weather as a cover for their evil acts in the dark streets of London. On the following cold night, Arthur returned to the site of the last crime himself, determined to search for any small clue that the investigation team might have overlooked the first time due to haste. The ground was muddy and heavily frozen, and the foul smell of the river filled the nose and hurt the senses, making the search process very arduous and exhausting for him and his close assistants. He began examining every small stone and every dark corner near the place where the poor body was found, searching for anything strange that might have fallen from the killer's pocket unintentionally. After long hours of precise and continuous search under light rain, he found a very small piece of paper lying under a large rock, protected from rain and wetness thanks to its completely hidden location. Arthur took the paper with extreme care and great caution, and used a strong magnifying glass to examine what was written on it clearly, to find that it contained strange numbers and symbols that made no sense at first direct glance. He felt that this small paper was the real key he had been searching for a long time, and it might be the strong link that connects all previous crimes to each other finally. He returned to his office very quickly, carrying the new evidence with a hand trembling slightly from the intense freezing cold and extreme excitement, realizing that this small piece of paper could change the course of the investigation entirely and reveal the identity of the serial killer who had terrified the city for a very long time. After a very precise examination of the paper in his office under the dim electric lamplight, Arthur realized that it was part of a very old train schedule dating back to distant previous years. The railway lines mentioned in the schedule had been cancelled for a very long time, and the mentioned stations no longer existed on official current railway maps. Arthur wondered deeply about the reason the killer kept this neglected old schedule, and why he found it specifically in the location of the last crime specifically without others. He began linking the times mentioned in the old schedule and the times of the recorded crimes, finding a very amazing match between the arrival times of the old trains and the estimated hours of death of the victims. He realized here that the killer uses this schedule not to travel by trains actually, but as a precise time guide to organize his criminal operations with extremely terrifying accuracy. The schedule represented an internal clock for the killer, helping him to move between different districts at times when guards are less vigilant due to the thick fog. This discovery was a real shock for Arthur, as it revealed a very high level of prior planning and criminal intelligence on the part of the unknown suspect. Arthur now had a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of the killer's modus operandi, bringing him a very big step closer to catching him before he committed another crime in the cold nights of London. Arthur decided to dive deeper into the history of the old and abandoned railways, so he went to the National Archives to search for information about employees who worked in those officially cancelled lines. He discovered that there was a former worker who had been dismissed from his job unfairly and harshly 20 years ago, and he had a record full of repeated complaints against the responsible company management. Arthur began to strongly suspect that this person might be the wanted killer, especially since he has very precise knowledge of the old schedules and completely abandoned stations. Arthur gathered all available information about this mysterious person, including his last address and a very old picture of him, and began monitoring his movements from a distance without the man feeling that he was under the security microscope. Arthur was very keen not to arouse the suspicions of the dangerous suspect, as he knew that any simple mistake could lead to his escape and disappearance forever in the very vast labyrinth of London. The operation required very long patience and extreme precision in execution, as every move by the police had to be calculated very accurately. Arthur felt that he was about to finish the complex puzzle, but he also knew that the next stage was the most dangerous of all, as he would face the killer face to face in a battle of wits that might determine the fate of many innocent lives in the very near future. Based on the precise analysis of the old schedule, Arthur predicted that the next crime would occur near an abandoned train station located on the outskirts of the old and neglected city. He decided to set up a very tight ambush in that dangerous area, where he distributed his men in strategic positions covering all possible entrances and exits of the abandoned place. The night was extremely cold and freezing, and the fog was so thick that the men could not see their hands clearly in front of their frozen faces. Arthur and his men waited with very long patience, freezing in their fixed places, without making any sound that might alert the cunning suspect to their presence. The hours passed very slowly and boringly, and every minute seemed like a whole lifetime of waiting and intense anticipation for the expected and fateful event. Arthur was staring into the surrounding pitch darkness, trying to capture any strange movement or sound of light footsteps on the gravel scattered on the old ground. He knew that the killer might not appear tonight for sure, but his strong criminal intuition told him that this was the last chance to catch him before he completed his comprehensive criminal plan. Tension filled the surrounding atmosphere, and every man in the ambush realized the gravity of the task resting on his shoulders on that fateful night that might change the history of crime in London. Suddenly, Arthur heard the sound of very light footsteps approaching slowly from the area of the abandoned station. And the sound was regular, as if the person was walking according to a specific and determined rhythm. The shadow of a tall man appeared protruding through the very thick fog, wearing a long coat and a black hat that completely hid the features of his face from the lurking eyes. The man was not carrying any visible weapon in his hands, but he was moving with the confidence of someone who knows the place well and fears nothing that might face him there in the darkness. Arthur signaled to his men to stay in their places accurately until the man came closer, to ensure the impossibility of his escape at the critical last moment. The heart was beating very strongly in Arthur's chest, as he watched every move made by the suspect with extreme precision without blinking his eye once. The man stopped suddenly at a specific point in the old station, as if he was waiting for something or remembering a very painful memory that passed in this exact place many years ago. Arthur exploited this golden opportunity and issued the signal for immediate attack. So police officers came out of their hiding places surrounding the man from all sides, cutting off any way for escape or potential resistance in those critical moments of the precise security operation. The man did not resist the sudden arrest, but surrendered with very strange calmness, as if he was expecting this inevitable fate from the beginning and was not planning to escape from final justice. When Arthur approached him and revealed his face boldly, he confirmed his identity as the dismissed worker who had been suspected since the beginning of the last precise investigation. The man never denied the charge directed at him, but began to speak in a very calm voice about the great injustice he was subjected to and how the system did not give him his right when he was in dire need of it. His motive was not murder itself or love of blood, but revenge against the system that neglected him, and using crimes as a way to draw attention to his case forgotten for very long decades. Arthur listened to his painful confessions in complete silence, realizing the human tragedy behind these crimes. But he also realized that the law does not forgive regardless of personal motives or painful old grievances. The man's hands were tied tightly and he was led to the closed police car, while the fog began to dissipate very slowly, revealing the face of the moon that was hidden throughout the long night. The very long chase ended, and Arthur felt a great weight lifting off his tired shoulders. But he did not feel joy, but deep sadness over the circumstances that led a human being to this very dark and painful path. On the following sunny morning, major newspapers published the news of the arrest of the fog killer, and tranquility gradually returned to the streets of London that had suffered from terror for very long weeks. Arthur stood in front of his wide office window, watching people who began to go out to practice their normal lives without fear of the shadows that were haunting them in every corner and place. Despite his brilliant success in solving the complex case, Arthur realized that evil never ends in this world, and that it may appear again in different forms in the near or very distant future. He closed the red case file and put it in the secret archive, sighing with relief after long nights of fatigue and strenuous effort that he exerted to reach the absolute truth. The fog had disappeared completely from the sky, and the sun began to rise to illuminate the city with warm light after nights of pitch darkness and painful freezing cold. Arthur learned from this important case that behind every crime there is a very complex human story, and that the detective's role is not only to catch the criminal, but to understand the reasons that drove him to that act. He returned to his home to rest a little from fatigue, ready to face any new challenge that the big city of London might impose on him, which never sleeps and does not stop producing secrets and mysteries that need someone to reveal them to the light.